Good afternoon.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good. Are you able to hear me well?
Um, are you okay on your end from
I,
mine?
I am. I'm good. I'm good. All right. You're familiar with
Okay,
IS.
yes, I'm gonna say too, I'm in jail and the Wi-Fi can be all over the map. So if we have to change this to just a phone call, that will still work here. Just a heads up if you lose me.
Oh, okay. Good. Thank you for letting me know that. Okay. What's on your agenda?
So I, first of all, am really glad that we changed IS to just 30 minutes because an hour of talking sometimes feels like I don't know. I talk with my college girlfriends an hour every couple of months, so it's a lot to think of it every week. But just in terms of what I've been thinking about and processing, and I don't know that I have a concrete direction or expectation around this, but I have noticed that in my first few reflections, I'm not writing about jail guys per se. What I am writing about is how I'm using things in jail and out of jail in conversation with one another. So, like skills that are across my life, maybe whether I look at them as chaplaincy skills or human skills or whatever. So, that was just a piece I was kind of reflecting on and just putting pieces back together of things that felt broken, felt maybe compartmentalized is a good word, and sort of just taking a deep breath and reconnecting who I am in all spaces.
Mhm.
And so, one thing I am pretty confident, I'm pretty friendly. I have a very good chaplaincy presence in jail. And I think I've struggled in the last few years, just in response to a church dynamic about who I am outside of my element. I tone it down a lot. And so I was just interested again, just using CPE self gratuitously as I can grab it and take hold and kind of see where I am in my own self and wrestling. That's one thing that I've been struck by is that I like myself. I'm confident with myself. Why am I my different self in different spaces with different people, different situations, different circumstances? Sometimes it'll seem so natural to me, and other times I'll be like, oh god, it tones down a little bit. So
Mm.
anyway, that was just my first few reflections in CPE, and I thought, how interesting. None of these are really about chaplaincy. They're about human me, and I just thought I would put that out for a little help in reflecting more deeply, more thoroughly, maybe is a better word.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I do think it resonates with the first level of investigation in chaplaincy training, which is self-awareness. And so I think your willingness to look at yourself, observe, and actually process is one of your strengths, one of your strengths that I've been blessed to see so far. So it's right in line with chaplaincy. I mean, in especially the training. The reality is it's in line with doing chaplaincy too. I think you made this powerful observation one day. I think it was during orientation. And you talked about how, in your context, if you are not authentic, they read you right away and it disrupts your
Mm-hmm.
ability to build trust. And that is critical in chaplaincy to be authentic and build authentic trust. And that authentic trust, in part, comes from knowing yourself. And so I spent the majority of my chaplaincy experience in a mental health setting where sort of the filters on calling people on their crap are all gone. So whether it was the doctor or the therapist or a nurse or environmental services employee or someone from food and nutrition or the chaplain, if the care receiver perceived that this person was not genuine or not real in some sort of way, I mean, they would feel free to share that in their own creative way. And so that whole thing about being authentic really comes from self-awareness. So I think it's right in there and it's really critical with your environment. And the other place where that kind of reflection that you do is so helpful in our group dynamics. I'm imagining not only in just as you make your way through the outcomes and indicators, although that will tug it out of you, but I'm also just imagining as we continue to grow and form as a group, you'll bring some of that same awareness. And we have to be at a pretty um, trust-filled place of performing for any one of us to feel comfortable enough to make an observation about us as a group. And that's a precious place to get. And I hope that we get there. And I think the path is the kind of reflection you're doing and self-awareness and the vulnerability of sharing it. It's right on target. It's why everybody wants to be a chaplain.
Of course, easiest job in the world.
Exactly. You put that up there with parenting, and I pretty much think that means you are God. So there you
You have a
have
lot of
it.
insight into God, for sure. Yeah, I will say honestly, in all genuineness, when I heard you speak the first unit, there was something about you in particular that felt really trustworthy and safe to me, which is why I was bummed I didn't get you for some instructor, but why I'm actually very glad to have you. So I think for me, that's part of the unfolding at this stage is to have someone who is revered in a religious space and familiar with that kind of leadership, and yet still with the duality of grace and space and learning. So I think for me, as I process, that's part of. I was trying to think, why would I jump right in like this,
Yeah.
like the first three things? But I think for me, it was kind of just latent in me all along. And now that I get to be in your group, and as you're talking about being part of this forming, I'm just like, well, you did ask for this, Kate. Like you know this sense of trust is present, so you're going to have to put yourself in the game authentically. So for me, those two things are kind of in conversation with one another. It makes me anxious and uneasy for sure, but
Mhm.
I think there is an element of trust there that sometimes you just know and you just roll with. You let it carry you because
Yeah,
that's what the next stage has to be.
well said. Well, what happens when those places where you have a different presentation, if you will, my words, not yours, what happens when they come together?
I think my default is just authentic me, glad me. And I think honestly, in most spaces, it's just that. I think for a while there was a duality of being, I think Alice said it. Alice always gives me the best language for things in things, but she said it was, I forget her exact word for it. It was like a code or a way of being in one space that you can't be in all spaces. And I think my default, maybe different from her, but my default is natural. But then I get into some spaces and I feel like I have to just do exactly the right thing or things will break. And so I think that is maybe kind of where that piece feels for me right now. And I would prefer to be authentic. It feels right to be authentic. That's where I want to go to. And if disrupted, I tend to default to that. But it's kind of like you have to hold the pose in some spaces. And I'm not always sure why or when I do that. I think when, yeah, maybe just I had to go see a therapist about things too. And what I learned from that was kind of this big sister vibe, right? Like my parents are super busy and I was the oldest child, and it was like, all right, well, we can't do it, but Kate will do it. So it's like, all right, chop chop, get your clothes on, lunch is packed, let's get you to school. Like and so it's like you put all yourself aside for a minute because things have to be done a certain way for a certain group of people. And I'm not saying good or bad, right or wrong, it gets stuff done, but it does kind of train that. And then the only other example I can think of is my dad. He had a few years back, he had a widowmaker heart attack and he was in the hospital, and he survived for this like crazy sequence of events, really shouldn't have survived. And my mom and my sister and I had a rotation where we would spend time with him. And I always got basically the night shift. So when he was in the ICU, I was in a chair next to him. And then I would stay with him for most of the night, like be up, be tired. And then I would go to work, and I was never better at my job than I was when I was doing that. So I was talking to a therapist and I was like, I think I'm like a serial killer. Like I'm doing this intense stuff all night, and then I can go to work and people are like, you just are so on point. It's incredible. And I thought, what is that? Like, what is that break inside of me? And she said, it's a really amazing superpower and a hugely crippling weakness if you don't understand it. And so I think that language has always struck me. So I might say a combination of what Alice said, just being a different person in different spaces, but also that ability to compartmentalize who I am naturally with the task that must be done, and more importantly, the people involved in the task that must be done. And some people you just can't be yourself around. You can't relax around. You can't feel safe around. And I think that's kind of where my wrestle is now, if that's helpful.
Oh, that's very helpful. Um, in the conversation with Alice that I was part of, we were talking about code switching.
That's the word. Yeah.
That's where, but that has a very racial dynamic to it, just to make you aware of the
Thank you.
origin of that term. Um, so this ability to focus, sort of lock in, even despite emotional fatigue or physical fatigue, or uh, that is a tremendous gift to be able to do that. I mean, athletes work hard to be able to find their flow as quickly as possible and sustain it. So that sounds in part like what you're describing. What's the downside of that?
I think there's just a higher cost depending on where I am, really. I can get there, I can lock in, and sometimes it's nothing at all, no trouble. I'm already right there. And sometimes it's like fake it till you make it. And the cost to energy, to relationship, to just fullness is higher because it's not that. But I think for me, then the feeling of feeling safe with someone would be like worth the cost, because I don't want to break or hurt or do a thing if I mess up. I'm so glad to know it, but I don't want the rupture piece again. That's a really hard piece to take. So for example, in the feedback you just gave, code switching, I did not know the racial piece. So your feedback, just really informative. It's like, oh, now I know, I get it, and actually learned something. So thank you for that gift. If that feedback is given differently, for me, it will be a deeper pain because my intent is not to harm, just to grow. So like those things for me, there's a cost in me somehow, I think,
Wow. Oh, that's
connected
very
with it.
insightful. That is very insightful. I know I cannot um, stop going back to the apology committee or examination. Now I can't think of the correct term. That seemed like such a traumatic experience. And in a sacred context, to me, trauma takes on a whole different nuance, than the trauma of the stranger who robs me versus the trauma of the people in my sacred personal space who harm me. I mean, that's where I went as you talk about you don't want to about how you're taking feedback and yeah, I had so many questions when you shared that. And I'm curious about where it shows up in your work now.
It's a good question. I think the logical, so again, just to recap, kind of, I didn't grow up in a church. This was my first church. This was my first experience with church people. And when all of this happened, I think I mentioned in one reflection, there was no committee, there was no dialogue. It was just a group of people that made a decision, three, about how I sounded and executed a punishment without involving a larger conversation or community or even somebody to kind of help me understand what had happened. And then each one of them sort of had their own avenues for satisfaction, feeling like they were satisfied with whatever outcome was there. So I look at that now with everything I've learned and studied and dialogued about since then, and I see the nonsense of it. I really do. Like in my head, I get it. And um, in my heart, I feel a lot of compassion for me because particularly painful in all of this is that my heart is always for the one that no one stands with. So, like in the Luke 15 narrative, I don't care how perfect the scenario for the 99 is, I like physically have visceral pain thinking that the one might hope for an invitation and not get it. So that's like kind of a double whammy. One, that it happened and it shouldn't have happened. It's not logical from a like you said, church community perspective. But two, that's like the worst pain for me. No one should be alone because that's just not how God works, period. And so I think that's probably what makes it more of a sensitive issue for me. I think about it from a chaplaincy perspective. I don't know. I think there probably was a season when maybe I overcorrected or undercorrected, but I don't know that that's abnormal to any chaplain. I think we all do that. We're all like way over enthusiastic and then like, what the F? I gave way too much. And
Yeah.
so that's a normal piece. The other
What the
piece,
what the F is a technical chaplain term.
yes. And that, so it's like just kind of, again, learning that balance between the knowing that it was the wrong thing to have happened and the feeling of pain in the experience of it. And for me, part of that, because again, silence was a condition, right? So I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone for a year. It was just, you go away for a year, because one of the people said that she felt like I would attack her physically, which is, again, just nutty because there's no basis for it. But when you have just a small group of people who talk amongst yourself, things build. And then when you have someone who's an outlier, the brain just makes 1,000 stories. And so that piece, I think, for me, just the opening of being able to talk, being able to get feedback, being able to see that there's so many accomplished, tremendous, gracious people in the field, and that not a one of us is perfect, but there's ways to dialogue about things that maybe someone who's new to faith wouldn't understand, like tone or trigger words or something that just is like a, oh, hey, so you see, like, maybe there's two sides to this. Do you kind of see how this could happen? And
Yeah.
so I would say that that's something I always try to bring now to my class. I work with some really, really intense humans, and always just kind of trying to never take it as an attack on me, but just a
Mm.
person struggling to understand a thing. So I would say that's probably one good thing that came out of it. One bad thing is that if somebody um, comes at me strong, I tend to just say, there's validity in what they're saying. Like, they're clear, they have something, and I've heard them, and let me just hear them out, and then we can go from there. But sometimes I what's the word, like, tone myself down to make space for their exploding. And I don't know that that's maybe a right thing. Sometimes, again, in chaplaincy, it's great, right? If it's not personal, you can receive all the exploding that you need to receive, because people just need to put feelings somewhere. But there's that moment, that shift where it becomes um, almost threatening, I guess, in a way. Then I tend to just
Mhm.
go, all right, you don't feel safe with me, totally okay. And I am not going to push that for better or for worse.
Mhm. Wow. There's so many layers in there. Are you, is it a part of your practice, for example, when presenting your verbatims, to say not just what you want feedback on, but how you'd like feedback?
No, I've never tried that.
What does it feel like to imagine trying that?
Well, when you just said that, I felt like a emotion in my chest. I don't know quite what it is, but I feel emotional about it. So I'm not sure yet. Like, it would be hard, and not the feedback piece, never the feedback. Actually, that's one of my superpowers, is I receive feedback very well. A lot of people I've worked with will say that.
Mhm.
But just, I think that maybe the part of being part of a community that cares to modify and teach, and that I could ask for that, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah, that's probably what I would say. It's just, I know in my head, again, it's a gracious group. That's the whole point of this. But then it's like, do I get to ask for that and receive it? Seems like, in my experience, that would be asking for a lot.
Yeah, what
And
is it?
maybe best to, yeah, maybe best to stay quiet and just receive what's given, because there'll be goodness in all of it, rather than to say, oh, and by the way, as if, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to your poem. So is it okay for Kate to get what might be especially specifically intentionally focused on Kate according to Kate's needs and wants?
Yeah, that's probably a good way to say it. Yeah,
Because
I'll
that's what,
still have to process.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what the space is.
Yeah. Yeah.
When,
And there
when,
definitely is trust in that dynamic for me. Definitely, like that. Yeah. Safety, yeah, has to feel safe to be able to ask for what I want.
yeah, that's huge. And all, whatever the presentation may be, whatever the persona or the perspective or the way you're navigating the space or presenting yourself may be, when you ask that, all that other stuff kind of has to slightly go to the side.
Yeah.
And is it okay for your needs to lead?
Yeah, my head says yes. My heart says just you could like, are you sure you'll be able to get the job done if you do it that way?
I love it. Your heart says this, your head says that. Good. We wouldn't want you to suddenly merge into one right here in
No,
front of me.
no. I'm a
That's
slow
powerful.
processor. I did declare that up front, so I feel
Yes,
it's
you
fair
did.
to hang on to that.
And that's a good, I mean, yeah, I keep saying it, but I think it's true. I think that's great self-awareness, and even to be able to say, my head says this, my heart says that. That's good self-awareness. That is what this chaplain stuff is. Um, yeah. And it's what I'm going through as an educator as well. I mean, the recording has multiple functions. Certainly, part of it is, should I do great harm to a student, someone can intervene, right? But it's also reviewing it in the hopes of help by senior educators to help make me a better educator. And I never leave singing, "Oh, I'm so great," when
Um,
when I get feedback. And I appreciate, so I share that to say I appreciate the vulnerability, and how it's this ongoing piece. And that word is not overused. We'll use it a lot, but I don't think we'll overuse it trying to capture this space that we're creating. There was another question that came to mind to me. So your therapist pointed out, hey, that's a really great superpower, but also if you're not aware, it's a pretty dangerous thing. What do you do to counter the dangerous parts of your superpower?
I think I just talk with trusted people. And actually, I have many good, deep friendships. I tend to, yeah, I just have a group of people that I love and trust and have known for a long time. I would say that was something I thought I had in the spiritual category, like the faith category, but I didn't I didn't realize how quickly people flee in response to ambiguity or false stories or anything. And so there was a little bit of destabilization there. Um, so I have people to talk to. I don't know that I've talked to many, let's see, a therapist, my husband, and probably one other person about the spiritual pain of all of this. But that was just a part of my life that was unexpectedly untenable when challenging circumstances arose. And again, I've used all of that to build and recreate and grow and stretch in new ways. And it really helps you identify healthy spiritual relationship dynamics when you go through it and you see what fails and what holds on. Um, but yeah, I would say maybe that piece is one of the weaker parts for me now, just in the dichotomy is you just one thing chaplaincy, it's a heck of a job. Like nobody gets it, right? So I can say it to you
Mhm.
or to my boss, who's an amazing chaplain, people who've done that work. But a lot of times something that you put out, it sounds different to layman's ears.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing. You can't really talk there. And then deep friendships, you can have the deep friendship, loving, affirming advice, support piece. But yeah, the other piece, there's something about it that I don't know. It just feels like coming home when you have a conversation with a good person. Like you talk to another chaplain and you're like, oh, we know the same thing. Like we can come at this with the same language. And even though our frameworks are different and our styles are different and our execution is different, I get how hard it is and you get how hard it is. And we get this
Mhm.
this joy and awfulness of being in this part of God's story together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a wrestle place for me. I think CPE is a really great space to use that because everyone gets it.
It's good timing as well. Very good timing in terms of that surfacing and surfacing at this unit, at
Yeah.
this level of your expertise, to not overly spiritualize it, but with the community that has
Yeah.
been surrounded with at this time. And
Yeah.
what
That's
you
really
said
my
about,
thought.
yeah, and what you said about your father through all of these circumstances to survive this horrific situation that many people would not have. There was a lot of stuff happening right in the right way in all of that. That seems to be what happened with you as well. That right now you're in the right place to
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah.
and um and you have the tools.
Yeah. It's true. I'm grateful for that every day.
Yeah.
And I really feel God in that. And I really feel grateful to this process and these people. It feels scary, but also like when you're holding a breath in the tunnel and you know that the end of the tunnel will come, it's just there's parts of that that feel harder than other parts.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Was there anything else you wanted to cover today?
No, thanks for just letting me get all that out in the first one.
You are welcome. I look forward to the second one, and I'll see you tonight.